Okay, well, thank you everyone for tuning in and welcome to CTO Talk. I am your host, Matt Ferrari. On this 30-minute program, we get to discuss the issues, the challenges, the opportunities that are impacting healthcare tech. You can always follow the show on Twitter at #CTO Talk or follow me at MP With me, I am really fortunate to have Aaron Friedman, who is the technology lead for healthcare and life sciences and the partner ecosystem at AWS. And today with Aaron, we're going to be discussing healthcare use cases that Aaron's really seeing in the market. So Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, it's really great to be here and have the opportunity not only just to talk today with you, but to really speak with someone who I consider a close friend and colleague. So really excited to have the opportunity to discuss the current trends in healthcare and sort of how technology is helping to shape that and really transform the industry.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. For the audience's benefit, everyone knows that I rarely talk at all about the company that I work for on these things, but I've been fortunate enough to know Aaron now for about 2 years. And the thing that really excites me about speaking with Aaron is his passion for healthcare. Those of you who have joined other shows and listened to these recordings, you know that what we're really talking about is how technology really drives healthcare outcomes, whether it be IT outcomes or clinical outcomes. And the moment that I met Aaron, I realized that maybe he works for, just the most innovative organization that I know when it comes to technology. But at his heart, he's really passionate about making a difference in healthcare. So that's why I'm excited to have Aaron on the show. Aaron, why don't you dive in and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt. And thank you for the really, kind words. And I think, as you mentioned, right, it really comes back to how we can work together to transform human health. And I'd say for me, that was really shaped when I was a kid. I was fortunate. I had, two of my grandparents were doctors, one of which was really one of the pioneers in really internal medicine and in nuclear medicine, actually, in fact. And they really inspired this wonder about life in general and how we can use medicine to improve lives. And I'd say, from a young age, I was really a driver, though I knew that I never wanted to be a traditional MD. So, I grew up studying, was always fascinated by science and mathematics, and went to school for biomedical engineering. And while I was there, I was really exposed to something that I, hadn't been before, which is really thinking about life on the molecular level, particularly how proteins function and come together and really are those really functional units of life beyond DNA. And that fascinated me, and sort of I took that love and ended up joining UCSD, California, San Diego for graduate school, where I focused on drug design for my doctorate. And since then, I'd say my background was originally in the pure sciences, but as I grew both in graduate school and beyond graduate school, I really got an understanding of how the key enabler underneath all of this is technology, and over time have gravitated towards really working to, I'd say, use technology to solve the relevant business outcomes in our industry, which of course, again, is back to improving human health. So whether it's genomics or healthcare interoperability or population health analytics, that's, I'd say, really what drives me and makes me excited to get up every day and work with our customers and partners and helping them, sort of reshape the landscape of healthcare. It's quite an exciting time to be part of this.
Yeah, that's really, really great and humbling, kind of your background, and now moving kind of into the deeper technology field. So to talk a little bit about genomics, actually, how do you feel genomics advancements in public cloud, where are they today and how are they going to evolve as organizations like AWS continue to build on machine learning and big data and analytics capabilities? What kind of outcomes have you seen and what do you see coming?
Yeah, so I would start by saying, first of all, genomics is very well suited to the cloud. When you think about it, purely from a workload perspective, and nearly every company in the space is moving quickly to the cloud, or if it's a net new startup, is starting with the cloud right away, such as companies like Grail. And when you think about the process, right, you're generating terabytes of data every day. It needs to be stored securely. And a good portion of the computational processing associated with genomics, a process that we call secondary analysis, you can really treat sequences coming off, say Illumina DNA sequencers independently, which means you can process genomes in a loosely coupled parallel fashion, which, really lends itself to the elastic capability that the cloud offers, such as AWS. And, one of the things that we're really seeing beyond that customers and partners are gravitating to is this sort of concept of using, things like spot instances, which is effectively spare AWS capacity that you can acquire at a very reduced cost and save up to, say, 80% on workloads. And when we look then at the value proposition, you're getting both the elastic nature of the cloud, which allows you to get higher throughput in your analysis, as well as really driving down the cost savings. So it really is helping our customers and partners be successful, both from a performance and cost standpoint. So one of the trends that I'm seeing that's highlighting this is what our horizontal, sort of our traditional machine learning big data partners are doing. And one of these is Databricks. And, what they released recently. So Databricks is a AWS Partner Network machine learning and big data competency partner. And, what they've done is they've taken their core competency in machine learning and big data, and particularly with Spark, and released their unified analytics platform for genomics, which gives customers the ability to accelerate their analysis on top of Spark. And they've done this by really optimizing the queries and the like for genomics analysis. And this is, I'd say, emblematic of a larger trend where our horizontal ISVs, our storage, big data, and machine learning, solution providers are starting to put healthcare and life sciences lenses on top of their offerings and offer more tailored solutions to meet the needs of our joint customers.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think as the audience is listening, I think it's really important that you're tying some of the AWS services back to some of the use cases that you've mentioned. Out of curiosity, just as a follow-up question, you mentioned Spot, and I'm seeing a tremendous amount of really great questions and use cases for Spot, even with our own, even at Clear Data, our own software development now starting to take advantage of Spot. Out of curiosity, when you talk to a healthcare organization, Aaron, what do you, how do you help educate them, or how would you advise the audience to learn about how to take advantage of something like Spot?
So I think it first comes back to, one of the things I'm always key on, and when I talk to customers and partners, they sort of feel the same way, is it comes back first and foremost to what business outcome do you want to achieve, right? What are we trying to solve for? And if it's a workload that is very bursty in nature, something like Spot, where you have that extra, capacity that you can sort of take advantage of and drive down your cost, really makes sense. So genomics is a classic example of that, right? Because if you're able to treat each individual genome independently, which in many cases, not every analysis, but in many cases you do, at least for the first part of the analytical pipeline, you're able to then say, okay, well, if I treat these independently, I just need them to finish, right? If I'm able then to say, well, I don't care if it runs on this instance type or this type of VM, it just needs these sort of core requirements, whether it's vCPUs or RAM, et cetera, you're really then able to broaden the scope of the type of compute capabilities that you want to or that you can use, and then that gives you the flexibility then to effectively what we call bidding on a spot price, where you can really diversify the compute resources you can use and use that to drive down your overall cost. But if you have something, for example, where it's a steady state workload, you can project this out for a large period of time, and it's not necessarily something that would be bursty in nature, spot may not be right for you. And then we have other options such as, reserved instance pricing and things like that. But it always starts with the customer problem and working backwards. And one of the things that we really try and focus on is that cost optimization pillar in our well-architected framework, where we are constantly working with our customers and partners to make sure that they're optimizing for cost, because we understand that if they're able to run the same type of workload and provide the same experience to customers at a lower cost, that's going to be more meaningful to them, and it's going to be more meaningful to their customers.
Excellent. That's really helpful. And the reason I asked the follow-up question is because even at the baseline level, when I walk into a hospital and I try to help educate them on the value prop of working with AWS and the value prop of moving to public cloud and out of CapEx to OpEx and all those things, it really oftentimes comes back down to exactly what you just said. What problem are you trying to solve, whether it's a clinical one or a cost one? And so I think that's really important for the audience to know. Switching gears to a topic that's really near and dear to both of our hearts, around security and compliance. Clearly we talk to many healthcare organizations that are, top of mind, thinking about security, compliance, privacy as they make these decisions. There's, ongoing security incidents and breaches at the healthcare system level. But AWS, has been just on a tear, at least my words, in regards to deploying and launching new security and compliance tools and capabilities over the last couple of years. And I've been honored to present on stage at reInvent around some of the ways that even, we consume those tools. I'd love to, know from you, how does AWS position with healthcare organizations that may be struggling with that legacy view on moving sensitive data outside of their own four walls?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, tying this back, I think it's always important to think about the context of the business objectives. And then, one of the things that we found that resonates really well is if you can, talk about, at AWS, we're always focused on what our customers are doing and have done. And what we found is if we approach an organization or start talking to an organization about others that have accomplished similar things, I think that is a really compelling use case, right? So if you think about, if we're talking about large healthcare organizations, it's hard to find, a pure public health IT organization larger than Cerner. And you have Ryan Hamilton up on stage at the AWS San Francisco Summit this past year talking about their use of AWS services and to really build out their next generation healthy intent platform. And I think when you start to talk about what other customers are doing and have done, it really breaks down barriers. But, first and foremost, it really does come back to our shared responsibility model for security. And I think that is something that's really important to understand, right? So when we think about it, or when we talk to customers and partners, it's really about the shared responsibility model. So at its core, AWS, right, provides the security of the cloud and then provides ability for customers and partners to be compliant in the cloud and be secure in the cloud. Because those two things, when we're talking, really go hand in hand. And there's a couple ways that we found that have been very successful with this. So the first is the numerous compliance, global compliance attestations we've achieved, whether it's ISO or SOC, et cetera. and really walking them through some of the controls. And when you examine AWS, you see that, the same security isolations that are employed as would be found in best practices in a traditional data center. These are things like data center security, separation of the network, isolation of server hardware, and isolation of storage. And then, right, we manage and control the components from the host OS and virtualization layer down to the physical security of the facilities. And on top of that, we give our customers the ability to build secure applications, right? So whether this is things like using the CIS benchmark to harden their Amazon machine images, which are their virtual machines, to using some of our auditing and logging services like AWS Config for configuration change management and CloudTrail to log all the API requests, and to do so in an isolated network, sort of our Amazon VPC. And as we walked through with customers the numerous sort of security and networking capabilities that we provide and some of the fine-grained identity and access management, it starts to resonate and really go beyond sort of the conversation of, okay, the four walls, but really to the conversation of, okay, everything you can do in a data center, you can do in the cloud, and then how we simplify it, right? Because instead of doing the long process of provisioning, hardware, installing it yourself, you're really just executing API actions. And this gives you additional power because, we know best practices, right, for writing software. You do things like test-driven development, continuous integration, continuous delivery. And now you can apply those exact same concepts to your infrastructure, right? So you can write a CloudFormation script which defines your environment and write actual tests against that script that validate, for example, that you're adhering to principles of least privilege for security, right? So making sure that the users and roles that you create within your environment only have access that they need and nothing more. And you can really do this at a fine-grained level and write those tests. So now you go from the concept of being able to be compliant in a data center to having this, near real-time view of compliance, and adopting this model of continuous compliance where every change you make can be tested, updated, and deployed. Because you're doing all that testing rather than having to provision new hardware, you're able to be more agile as well. And on top of that, there's a lot of sort of new capabilities, I'd say, that our partners provide on top, right? So you can think of, and I know you know this, Matt, but you can think of our partners really as our force multipliers in the industry, and that they, in fact, extend our shared responsibility model. So they may do things like OS level configuration, doing some of the hardening, creating golden sort of virtual machines or images for their customers to run on top of. And one of the really cool trends, which I know you guys have been really pioneering or spearheading, is how you visualize compliance, right? Because ultimately it comes back to, the people process and the technical controls as it pertains to a specific regulation. And one of the things I think that ClearData has done really well is give their customers a real-time view of how the technical controls that are implemented in the cloud, specific, of course, to your interpretation of the regulations such as HIPAA or HITRUST, it's really powerful and it resonates with customers. And what this does is it accelerates business conversations because you can go from the conversation of, hey, am I compliant, to getting that real-time view, and instead focus on the things that really differentiate your business, right? Whether it's interoperability, exchanging healthcare messages, or focusing on, for example, how we're going to apply analytics at scale to enable precision medicine. There's really, once you can simplify that compliance conversation, you really unlock the door to really what is differentiating for a healthcare business.
Yeah, that is a great point. Yeah, oftentimes when I'm talking to healthcare organizations, a lot of times it's ISV or SaaS organizations that are developing some kind of tooling to ultimately be something that improves the lifespan of an individual, or make some kind of clinical outcome, or maybe it's the way to accelerate clinical trials. Those kind of use cases that I've seen recently, and really the story when you're working with a partner is really around helping those healthcare organizations remain laser focused on that, on their persona, on that end customer, and not have to worry about, in this case, security and compliance, or the guts of knowing every single thing about the AWS platform. And speaking of that, a good portion of my life at this point has been focused on building automation and healthcare services, and now on top of HIPAA eligible services. And in the years I've worked with you, the acceleration of eligible services on AWS has been just phenomenal. I'd love for you to just do a quick review. What recent AWS products have become HIPAA eligible that you're excited about?
Yeah, so I think this comes back to what we're seeing, of course, our customers use and whatnot. So one of the ones that recently became HIPAA eligible is Amazon SageMaker. So SageMaker, for those who aren't familiar, is it's really focusing on how can we democratize machine learning, how do we accelerate the ability for our customers to build, train, and deploy machine learning algorithms at scale and deal with virtually infinite scale of data as it comes in. And SageMaker is one. I'll start with that because I think there's a couple really interesting applications that I've seen recently. So the first one goes back to Cerner. So one of the things that Ryan Hamilton spoke about, and Ryan's their SVP of Population Health, is using SageMaker, they were able to reduce, so for their Healthy Intent platform, they're training and building new sort of what they call intelligence models. And they've been able to use SageMaker to reduce both the time and cost of their new intelligence models by more than 80%. And that's something that's I think really powerful. And then, because then you can accelerate the ability to train models as part of your business, then you can really, move forward, I'd say, a lot faster, iterate, whether you're testing your ML models more, developing more sort of robust machine learning models, or you're taking those and more quickly delivering, care to patients. It's something that's, I think, very powerful. And another really interesting, I found this fascinating application that was recent was what Slalom did with Veripad. So the World Health Organization estimates that about 1 in 10 medical products in low and middle income countries it's either substandard or falsified. There's some issue with it, right? So what this means is vital medicines aren't making it to the individuals that need to because they're in some way falsified. So what Slalom did is work with Veripad to build new machine learning models on AWS to basically use Veripad's technology and improve the resolution by which Veripad's products can identify fake medications. And that has, a real tangible impact around the world because now you're able to more quickly understand what medications are real, what are falsified, and by reducing the number of falsified medications out in the field, you're improving the likelihood that the individuals that need a therapeutic can receive it. Beyond SageMaker, there's a bunch of others. There's a couple that I'm really interested in seeing. One is our EKS, our managed Kubernetes service, recently went generally available and then shortly followed with HIPAA eligibility. And we've seen Kubernetes really become widely adopted in the field for container orchestration. And I think if that trend continues, it'll be something, having that HIPAA eligibility up front will be something that is really powerful for our customers and partners. Another one, which while DynamoDB was already a HIPAA eligible service, I think the more recent encryption at rest feature is something that is really exciting. So one of the things that we enabled recently is the ability to server-side encrypt DynamoDB, which is our massive NoSQL database, or massively scalable NoSQL database. And what this does is it really gives customers the ability to, for example, take healthcare messages, right? So if you think about a key value store, you may be storing a JSON blob as your document, or storing a bunch of different fields in there. And that could really relate back to, for example, the trend we're seeing in healthcare messaging with the shift from HL7v2 into the FHIR standard, which is much more RESTful. And being able to store those data more efficiently in DynamoDB is something that I think will be really powerful going forward for customers. And there's a bunch of others, right? So IoT core is another major one, as we look at customers doing medical device on AWS. If it's a customer like Philips, for example, with their Health Suite digital platform, there's the short answer is I'm excited by a lot, and I think the thing that we're hearing from customers, and we're trying to continue to satisfy and delight customers with, is increasing that pace of HIPAA eligible services. So one of the things that we always say at AWS and Amazon in general is it's always day one. And I think we're trying to really adopt that mindset here and provide as many HIPAA eligible services as possible for our customers.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful, and I know that we're up against time here, but for those in the audience, hopefully you got the point I've been talking about the last couple of shows, which is the vast majority of services that are being released for public cloud now on AWS are being released both to push innovation, as Aaron mentioned. Kubernetes as an example is something that even ClearData is seeing a tremendous amount of demand for, as even Gartner, now touts that by 2020, over 50% of enterprise applications will actually run a form of containerization. And so I think, balancing the innovation, which Aaron brought up a lot of services today, with very specifically the eligibility to use them for HIPAA-related functions and other PHI and PII functions, as we're thinking about GDPR and GXP and all these other things, I think are just so vital. And Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time with me today. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you have a comment about today's episode, please check out and follow #CTO Talk on Twitter, or follow me at MP Ferrari. You can, of course, learn more about CTO Talk at healthcarenowradio.com or at cleardata.com. I'm Matt Ferrari. Until we talk again, have a wonderful week.